Welcome to the UGC EPG Pathshala lecture series in computer science. In this series of lectures, we have been looking at software engineering. This session, I will be giving an overview of capability maturity model. Some of the learning objectives for this particular section include: initially we will try giving importance on why we need regulation and what are the standards that are provided for an industry or organization. Then we will try importing on the necessity of different standards that are existing like ISO, CMM, ITIL. Specifically for this particular lecture, we will detail on the continuous process improvement, where I will be talking more on the various levels of capability maturity model, and we will try indicating on the various timelines associated with this process improvement. Initially, for any specific organization, if it is to be established, we will try understanding on two important aspects. One is called a regulation, the other one is called a standard. We will say the definition for regulation as a legal restriction promulgated by government administrative agencies through a rule making supported by a threat of sanction or a fine. So, in case if a regulation has been put forth by a government administrative agencies which are supposed to be rules, now with these regulations we can go on any legal restriction frame, but this regulation is also supported by a threat of sanction or there will be an imposition of a fine. But as an alternate case to a regulation, any organization need to establish their own standards. So, for that case we may have to understand what a standard mean. A standard is supposed to be a level of quality or excellence that is accepted as a norm or by which actual attainments are judged. What are we supposed to attain? What is the quality that the product has to provide? So, we will basically look at the quality, excellence and the level of attainment of a particular item which are done by a standard. We will try to understand why to create a regulation and what is the need for imposing a standard. Right from the beginning of this course, we have been mentioning three important things that is necessary for any projects, process and product being developed. In order to have quality centric work, the standard need to be established. So, we may have to ensure initially that the product has a better quality, the organization has a better quality, only then the product becomes higher competitiveness and it will be more qualitative. And we also may have to ascertain the competitiveness of the organization. We may have to avoid desperate practices within the same industry. Many non-restrictive activities may not be entertained, and within the same industry there cannot be any conflicts. So, we may have to avoid desperate practices, and regulation is imposed in order for looking at the increasing cost of information technology. Not only that, we may have to look at the increasing size of information technology workforce also, so that we can regulate and maintain a standard. So, some of the timeline measures associated with this regulation and standard are ISO, which is International Standards Organization, CMM, which is Capability Maturity Model, ITIL, which is Information Technology Infrastructure Library, where we will try to bridge the gap of various services. We will try to understand each and every component in detail to start with, one of the standard organization which is called International Standards Organization, what they do and for what purpose they have created this ISO. If you look at ISO, it is the world's leading developer of many standards across the globe. It has more than 156 countries as its member. Its portfolio has more than 15,036 standards that are used in every sector of business, starting from the industry, technology and various components. Some of the partners who are associated with this International Standards Organization are IEC, which is International Electrotechnical Commission, International Telecommunication Union and World Bank. When you look forward on the path associated with the International Standards Organization, we may have to talk from various perspectives. One, if you look at the environmental perspective, we may have to develop a standard for meeting the new requirements. Say in the recent scenario, we may look at a greenhouse gas verification. We can even look at climate mitigation and many other aspects like this, which can look at environment for sustainability. So, in order for sustainable development, what are the various initiatives that can be looked after are the preliminary or one of the component of work done by ISO. Not only that, this ISO looks after various service sectors which establishes standards for personal services, personal financial services. It also looks at market opinion, social research, tourism and so. More than this standards organization not only concentrates or looks after the environment and the services, but also we may have to ensure that this also imposes a level of security. So, maritime port security, freight transport security and looking after illegal trafficking can also be done as part of, can also be a component associated with ISO. And one other practice which ISO looks after is the good managerial and organizational practice, which tends to develop many social responsibilities. You can ask me a question of, although ISO looks after all these activities, but what are the benefits of getting into ISO? As the name indicates, it is the standards established across the globe. So, international recognition has been achieved. So, worldwide recognition across 153 members of the country, which includes developed and developing countries. We can also level the playing field and we can disseminate new technologies and businesses which will be approved across the globe. The second timeline measure that we are about to talk is on the capability maturity model. As the name indicates, every organization job is to understand on the maturity level that they have attained. So, there seems to be multiple levels associated. Every level has got their own characteristics, or they have defined individual activities for every level, and once after achievement of those characteristics, we will attain or mention the maturity of the organization. So, this CMM has been created by Software Engineering Institute, a research center founded by the World Congress in 1984. This has a structure which designs to direct IT organizations through software process improvement. But then if you look at the entire philosophy of capability maturity model, it is not by establishing an organization at the beginning and say that our system is advanced in comparison with any other existing systems, but then we may have to look at the overall organization, the process associated with the organization in a term of continuous improvement. So, the philosophy behind working with capability maturity model is to understand on the continuous process improvement. To detail more on what we understand from the term CMM is, CMM is a method of assessment used to develop and refine a software development process, which is widely used by many organizations. And this CMM is based on the managerial styles using quantitative methods. It defines generic process areas or key process areas, which tries to define what and not how. So, this says what are the set of activities which should have been established by an organization rather than looking at how it should be. The methodology of establishing is not being taken care, but then what activity is required so that we qualify for the every level. And this CMM is looked after at 5 important capacity levels or capability levels, starting from level 1 to level 5. If you closely look at the second point, which is key process area that defines what and not how, it is both an advantage and a disadvantage for the entire CMM process. Since it is not mentioned on a specific technology or methodology over which we may have to establish, that may look to be as a disadvantage. But having defined what is what, we may able to establish where we stand as per capability maturity levels. Now, let us look at the evolution of capability maturity model. The original release of software engineering capability maturity model was established in 1993. But then in the previous slide I have told you this capability maturity model was developed by or created by the Software Engineering Institute in 1984. But then in 1993 the same capability maturity model has been defined specifically for software engineering CMM. After this development in 93, there has been so many variants that have started developing in this period. So, which has tailored to fit many organizations or some particular organizations like system engineering CMM, which is majorly called SE CMM, trusted CMM, which is TCMM, security system engineering CMM, people CMM, which is widely known by many of us, integrated product development CMM, which is IPD CMM. Now, let us specifically look at with what as a goal this capability maturity model has started. This capability maturity model provides an organization with the framework for improving its process. As I have told you, the entire phase of capability maturity model is to address on the continuous process improvement. So, a framework has been defined or designed to showcase the improvement of all its processes and its ability to manage the development, acquisition and maintenance of products or services. This is specifically provided through appraisals and assessments of the organization's processes based on CMM criteria. Not only that, it also tries to provide clients with a maturity scale rating starting from level 1 to level 5 as I have mentioned for the potential vendors. So, where does an organization stand between level 1 and level 5? That defines the maturity of an organization. A company which has got level 5 means it is more matured. That means higher the CMM rating, higher will be the maturity of a organization. So, the more mature an organization, the more likely its processes and development are to succeed. So, when we look at the overall processes that are being defined and the development strategy that we are tending to do, the success of these two activities are dependent on the maturity of the organization. As a later component, we have also thought about another buzzword which has emerged from CMM, which is called CMMI. This I stands for integration, capability maturity model, integrated. So, the main motivation towards this capability maturity model is that it started in 1980s on military projects that ran over the allotted budget, where in the United States Air Force funded Software Engineering Institute study, where the model of CMM was being used for software development, but problems were found when multiple instances of CMM were being used. Hence, they started trying to create a CMMI, which was to address the specific issue. So, hence it was called capability maturity model integrated. Now, that I repeat in saying the importance of capability maturity model is to maintain the continuous process improvement, and we may also have to look at the development processes. So, if you look at the features that are associated with capability maturity model, we will look at the organization's activities explicitly linked to business objectives. So, the visibility of the organization activities is increased to help you ensure that your product or service meets the customer's expectations. So, we may have to continuously monitor on the business objectives, whether it meets the organization's objectives, mission statements. We will closely monitor on that. That becomes the key feature for any maturity process. We also try to learn from new areas of best practices that the industry tries to adopt. Thereby, we can create a maturity model. We can also instantiate in the creation of structures which looks after maturity levels, key process areas, goals, and also to look at some of the very common features. From this slide onwards, we will try comparing between various timelines that we have seen, like CMM versus Six Sigma, CMM and Six Sigma. We will try comparing between them. If you look at some of the differences between what we understand from the term CMM and what we know about Six Sigma. Six Sigma majorly focuses on reduction of defects. We cannot ensure on a product which is 100% defect free, but then we can say on a product which is 99.999% defect free, which is close to 100%. So, Six Sigma concentrates majorly on reducing on the defects. Most of the organizations can say that they have reduced to 99% defect free state, but then the objective of Six Sigma is to bring that 99 to close to 100%, which is 0.999% increase, which is very close to 100%. So, that with that as a base, if we try to compare capability maturity model and Six Sigma, capability maturity model closely looks at designed with software completely in mind. It looks at design goals and they do not focus on the customer. Although Six Sigma focuses entirely on the customers, but then CMM looks after only the processes, not on the customer focus. In terms of organization's improvement, this tries to improve on the methods and processes, and the major key processing areas associated with CMM are the levels like initial, repeatable, defined, managed and optimizing. We will look at more closely on what these levels indicate and what are the properties associated with these levels. This CMM again is planning and management centric, whereas if you compare the CMM with Six Sigma objectives, it is purely designed to meet the goals of the customer. So, any demands posted by the customer, that should be met, and it should also focus towards the enterprise strategy. If you look at the quality characteristics, the intention of Six Sigma, as I have told you, is to improvise from 99% to 99.999, where the reduction in the number of errors to n number of lines of code. If you look at the design alternatives, Six Sigma looks or watches closely on the higher level design. It is basically planned thoroughly for verification alone, and this goes on pilot runs. Whereas, if you look closely on the interactions between CMM and Six Sigma, they work closely together with the higher CMM levels. That means, at CMM level 5, which is optimizing, mostly in line together, although capability maturity model is an organizational change model. CMM level 1 to 4, although Six Sigma can be used at these levels, its goals are competing with CMM. So, most of the concentration or work nature is close at the higher levels rather than the lower levels. How about it when we try to compare CMM with international standards organization? CMM looks closely on continuous process improvement. So, its scope is completely on the software. Customer satisfaction is not part of CMM, which we have already looked at in Six Sigma. The major concept of adopting to the best practices delivered from industry leaders, and we may have to look at the rating system between level 1 to level 5 to look upon the maturity levels. Whereas, if we are very close to ISO, ISO maintains or tries to maintain the acceptable quality system. Rather, the scope of ISO is not restricted to software alone, it is extended for hardware, processed materials, and also for services. In coordination or in concurrence with Six Sigma, the importance of ISO requirement is to meet the requirements as posted by the customer. So, customer satisfaction is mandatory when we understand ISO. It is not by best practices we try to adopt to maturity standards or maturity model, but then standards here are achieved based on few certification tools. Here again we will try comparing. We have seen some distinctions, but now that we will closely look at what comparison we can make between CMM and ISO. Between CMM and ISO, they both can be used together. They overlap, but not completely, but significant enough. Say if you are at level 3 of CMM, it is usually easy to get a certification of ISO 9001. Even level 2 can also fetch you a certification, but both are for improvement of the software. In specific, ISO is to conform to ISO standards, CMM is to follow industry standards. You can use an industry standard that conforms to ISO. As I have already mentioned, there were different levels that were associated with CMM starting from level 1 to level 5. We will now look at what these levels indicate. Level 1, we say it initial, level 2 it is managed, level 3 defined, level 4 quantitatively managed, and level 5 optimizing. If at all an organization has a maturity level of 1, which indicates processes are unpredictable. So, there is no proper definition which has been given already, and it comes as though as a run, then it is unpredictable. And these processes not only are unpredictable, but are also poorly controlled and reactive in nature. So, in that specific juncture, we say this level as very preliminary level, which satisfies initial constraint alone. From initial, if an organization has to move to a managed state where the processes are planned, documented, performed, monitored and controlled at the project level, but these are quite often reactive in nature, again in compliance with the level 1. So, we are trying to manage. So, management issues are posted in a way to ascertain on planning the activity, documenting the processes, performance on the processes, monitor on the processes and control on the processes. But when we move towards defined state, there is a clear characterization of the processes. The processes are clearly understood, standards are defined, procedures are given, there are appropriate tools which defines on these processes, and we may say organization level has improvised. So, this is no more reactive, this is purely proactive in nature. In short, in this particular session, we have started talking about capability maturity model. The major intention of capability maturity model is to define the processes, characterize based on processes and to define closely on the continuous process improvement. So, CMM allows process improvement in all verticals of the organization, and because of CMM it can fetch a huge benefit if level 5 is being achieved, where all the activities associated in terms of processes are clearly understood. So, we may have to use appropriate tools that is on par with the adoption to an organization. So, we have also talked about the various timeline measures like ISO, CMM, ITIL, but we may have to describe on ITIL in detail. Thank you.